Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Colleen Feige. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Edina, and I want to welcome you to hear about Minnesota redistricting. I'm going to start this off, and then we'll be letting some more people in, as there's some joining the conference now. And I am very pleased to be able to introduce our speaker this evening, Peter Wattson, JD. He has been involved in redistricting for 6 decades, so he knows an awful lot about this subject.
Peter, would you like to unshare your screen, please?
There, thank you. He served as a counsel to the Minnesota State Senate for 40 years, and he's worked with the National Conference of State Legislators since 1975. He has assisted in drawing, challenging, and defending redistricting plans. And most recently, I should say, he served as the lead plaintiff in Watson versus Simon, and that it was joined in that effort by League of Women Voters Minnesota. And let me speak also to the audience. If you would please turn off your microphones, it's just easier. So in case a phone rings or a child comes in, that won't interrupt the presentation. And also, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll be monitoring that. Joni Bennett will be monitoring that, and we will make sure that those get asked. And also, I think it's kind of appropriate today to say that, the League of Women Voters works to grow, empower, and protect the vote so that to make democracy work for all. And we know that democracy in our world is being threatened now, and I think in various places around the world. So I do certainly extend my thoughts, and I'm sure we all do, to those that are suffering in Ukraine, Russia, and so forth. So Peter, with that, I will turn it over to you, and thank you so very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Colleen, for that kind introduction, and thanks to all of you and the League of Women Voters Edina and anybody else who has tuned in for your willingness to listen to me talk about redistricting, because I love to talk about redistricting. What I'm going to talk to you about tonight is why redistricting is necessary, when it happens, who drew the maps, and what is the impact of those maps going to be.
You got muted.
So Peter, you're
Where do I
muted.
need to go back to?
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to talk about first the difference between reapportionment and redistricting. Reapportionment is the process of assigning seats in a legislative body among established districts. The district boundaries don't change, the number of members per district does. That's the process followed with the US Congress every decade when they decide how many seats each state is going to be entitled to. Redistricting, on the other hand, doesn't change the number of members per district, it changes the district boundaries, often keeping the number of members per district at 1. Why do we need to do this? Well, the first reason is because of that reapportionment of congressional seats. When seats move from one state to another, such as from Michigan to Montana or California to Oregon, both of those states involved in that shift need to change their congressional district boundaries because they have a different number of districts to draw. But even within those states that were fortunate enough not to lose a congressional district, and how many people did it take for us to keep that 8th district? Everybody know that? 26, not 26,000, 26 people is what kept that 8th seat for us. But even if the number of districts has not changed, often the population shifts within a state. How does that work? It's a fact of life in redistricting that absolute numbers tend to be less important than relative numbers. It matters whether the growth in your area was faster or slower than average. If your growth has been slower than average, then the districts in your area are going to need to grow in size in order to take in more people in order to equalize the populations. If it's grown faster than average, then those districts need to have to shrink in area to take in fewer people. Here's a map of Minnesota House districts that shows what happened to their populations as a result of the 2020 census. And the districts in various shades of green are one whose populations grew slower than average. Those green districts are going to have to get larger. But things being as they are, these northern districts are not going to get larger by going into Canada or westernly into the Dakotas. These districts are not going to grow into Wisconsin or Iowa. They're going to move toward the Twin Cities because that's where the growth has been faster than average. What do the Twin Cities look like? Well, most of the area has grown faster than average, especially the suburban ring. So those districts will be growing smaller. There are a number of districts here that have grown slower than average. They're going to have to grow larger. An awful lot of action, changing of boundaries in this area. And we'll see what what the result of that has been when we begin to look at the maps. You all know that the census was April 1 of 2020, and then we got our apportionment on April 26th, and we finally got the necessary block populations to draw district boundaries August 12th. And everybody involved with redistricting has been working very hard to get that job done in a much shorter time than usual. We have a statutory deadline that says we need to be done drawing the legislative and congressional district by February 15th of this year, just a couple of weeks ago. How do you suppose we managed to do that? Well, the legislature has the power to redraw those boundaries at its first session after each census in order to equalize their population. How's that been going lately for the legislature? Did anybody have any reason to suspect they might not get the job done? Well, there is a history. And since 1972, the courts have been drawing legislative plans, and since 1982, they've been drawing congressional plans as well. This is because in those years when it was necessary to draw a plan, ever since the 1950s, we've always had divided government, not necessarily through the whole decade, but in the years when it was necessary to draw a plan, we've always been divided. And so the legislature has been unable to get the job done. So what happens when you see that maybe they're not going to get the job done? Well, I was looking at the legislature's activities in January of 2021 and trying to help them get together on some method of adopting plans. But I was keeping an eye on the calendar because since 1972, when that first lawsuit was filed that resulted in the drawing of legislative maps, Alan Weinblatt, who was a year ahead of me in law school, had filed a suit asking the courts to draw plans in the event that the legislature failed. His first suit was filed in March of 1971. In subsequent decades, or April, in subsequent decades, he moved up to March. In the last 3 decades, the first suit has been filed in January. I've been having the Capitol barber cut my hair for more than 40 years, and I keep going back to him, even though I've been retired for 11 years, because he's such a great source of rumors. So I'm sitting in the barber's chair on February 3rd, and he tells me, Peter, what I hear is that neither the House nor the Senate has any intent of passing either a legislative or congressional plan. I said, Ken, I don't know how that can be, because if they were intending on the courts drawing the plans, they surely would have filed a lawsuit by now. I wonder why they didn't. On my way home from the barber, I called Alan Weinblatt and said, Alan, what's your strategy here? I don't understand it. You always file in January. Now it's February. What's going on? He says, Peter, I can't file a lawsuit. I'm no longer practicing law. I've retired. Well, Alan, who's going to file a lawsuit then? Peter, you are. But Alan, I'm not a courtroom lawyer. I can't do that. Peter, we'll find you a lawyer. So we made a bunch of phone calls and we found the perfect law firm to take on this responsibility. It's the James H. Gilbert Law Firm of Eden Prairie, and they assigned their associate Adam Sinkowski to work as the primary lawyer on our suit. And that was February 3rd. We started the conversations. February 19th, Adam filed a suit in Carver County District Court and asked the Supreme Court to take jurisdiction. What were we after? These Wattson plaintiffs, who consisted of my relatives and friends and a friend of a friend of a relative. We were after equal representation for all citizens, equalize those populations, just as the maps showed needed to be done. Second, we wanted that minorities would have an equal opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. And third, we wanted to do something new. We wanted to ban partisan gerrymandering. We wanted to have a principle that said the political party that wins the most votes statewide elects the most members to a legislative body. It seemed to make sense to us that whoever got the most votes should get the most seats. But that has not been true in past decades in Minnesota. 2 out of the 3 Senate elections in the last decade resulted in the party that got fewer votes statewide winning just barely 1 or 2 more seats in the Senate. And so they controlled, even though they were in the minority statewide. We thought that was wrong. We wanted to correct that. So we filed suit, asked the Supreme Court to appoint a special redistricting panel. Within a month, we were joined by the Anderson plaintiffs, a group who said that they were Republican voters and that they were not being adequately represented by the Wattson plaintiffs. And I said, fine, come on in. Month after that, the Sachs plaintiffs got together. They filed a separate lawsuit saying they were DFLers and the Wattson plaintiffs and the Anderson plaintiffs were not adequately representing their interests. So I said, come on in. Then even after the panel was appointed at the end of June, the Corey plaintiffs, who said that they represented people who were Black, Indigenous, or persons of color, they were not adequately represented by any of the 3 previous groups of plaintiffs. And so we said, come on in. So we had 4 groups of plaintiffs in this lawsuit. Panel was appointed at the end of June. They held public testimony, adopted principles. We all submitted our plans at the same time, December 7th, and had 10 days to examine each other's plans and comment on them before the oral argument on January 4th. The members of the panel did not ask a single question at that oral argument and went off to draw their plans. And by Monday, February 15th, I was wondering, have we wasted our time all this year? They had no questions. Who knows what they might do? Well, all of our efforts over this last year have proved to be in vain. Well, what principles did they adopt? Population equality, same as previous years. Minority representation, same as previous years. A new principle that we, the Wattson plaintiffs, proposed, and the other plaintiffs generally joined us in that, that let us not divide American Indian reservations more than necessary. The court said, well, we've always given them their due in the past, but we think it's appropriate. We're going to have a principle to that effect, this time for the first time. Our Constitution says that districts must be formed of convenient contiguous territory. We have a statute that says they must not divide counties, cities, or towns more than necessary. And there's a traditional districting principle in Minnesota and elsewhere that you preserve communities of interest. This decade's panel took compactness, which had previously been ranked a little bit higher, along with convenient and contiguous territory. They said, it's important, but we're not going to treat it as important as any of the other principles. But for the very first time in Minnesota history, they did adopt a principle against partisan gerrymandering. They said districts must not be drawn with the purpose of protecting, promoting, or defeating an incumbent candidate or political party. We said, that's wonderful. That made us the 18th state in the US to have such a principle, either for legislative or congressional plans. They made one change in their treatment of incumbents. In past decades, they'd always said, we're not going to look at the residents of incumbents while we are drawing our plans. But when we are done, we got a draft. We're going to take a look and see what is their impact on incumbents. And if we can avoid pairing incumbents by making minor changes in the districts, then that is what we will do. Not this year. We're not going to look, we're not going to make any changes. They also said they were not going to consider election results in evaluating their plans and drawing their plans. I don't know how they managed to have a plan that does not consist of a partisan gerrymander if they're not even looking at the impact of the plan. So February 15th comes and we see the new plans, and I am quite pleased because I feel like my son, who remarked to me on the birth of his first son. He says, Dad, I look at him and I'm seeing my baby pictures. I looked at the plans adopted by the court and I thought, I recognize those plans. They're not exactly what the Wattson plaintiff submitted, but they're very similar. We like those plans. There are some differences. We'll have to examine them. Well, what did the court do overall? It followed its usual principle of making the least change possible. That is, do only the changes necessary to equalize the populations among the districts without going further. Don't be creative. Preserve the cores of the prior district. And by core, we're talking about the voting age population in each district. Same voters as the previous decade. How did the court do? Well, the plaintiffs who presented the congressional plan with the least change were the Anderson plaintiffs, 96%. The court came down with 93%. We had the least change among the proposed Senate plans at 78%. The panel did us one better at 79%. At 72% for the House plans, the panel was not quite as good as the Anderson. I think we had something in between the two, but it was good enough. For those minority districts, we had heard from the Corey plaintiffs that all of the population growth in the state of Minnesota over the last decade is attributable to people of color, people who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color. And the court was successful in creating one more majority minority district in the House and in the Senate. That's a district where a majority of the voting age population is a member of one or other of the racial or language minorities. Minority opportunity districts we define as having 30% or more total minority population. And the panel created one more of those in the Senate and two more in the House. I think they did an admirable job of doing that. What's the partisan split? Well, the current congressional plan used in the 2020 election is a 4-4 plan. And the new one, I think, will be a 4-4 plan also, although the statistical measure that I use, an index of 14 statewide partisan races from 2012 to 2020, 34 million votes. It shows that the 8th congressional district, currently represented by Pete Stauber, is 0% DFL, which would make this a 5-3 plan. I don't think it really is a 5-3 plan because Nobody's going to beat Pete Stauber unless they come up with a DFL hockey player whose brother won more championships for the Minnesota Gophers than Pete Stauber's brother. On the Senate plan, the current 2020 plan had 38 DFL districts. This one has only 36. So the Republicans did a little bit better on the Senate plan. On the House plan, the current 2020 plan has 71 DFL districts. The new one has 4 more. So the Democrats came out a little bit better on the House plan. Are there competitive districts? Districts where either party has a reasonable chance to win. And I define a competitive district as one whose party index is no greater than 8%. So a swing of 4% either way could cause the district to change or elect somebody of the other party. There were 4 in the 2020 congressional plan. Now there will be only 3. We lost one. In the Senate, the court actually created 1 more than in 2020. And in the House, 6 fewer. It's really tough to create competitive districts where the voters have sorted themselves out to live so much more with people who think like them and vote like them. But the court did, I think, a commendable job in creating competitive districts. We've suggested they should have a principle that districts should be competitive. They did not adopt that principle, but they did a good job on meeting that principle. What happens from here? March 29th, the cities need to be done with redrawing their precincts and wards so that no precinct or ward is in more than one House, Senate, or congressional district. And then those precincts and ward will be used by the county boards, school boards, and park boards and so forth to create their own districts. They have until April 26th. Legislators have until May 8th to establish residency in their new districts. There'll be a number of them doing that, and I'll talk more about that in connection with the maps, the members who were paired and have to move to another district. Filing deadlines May 31, and you know when the primary and the general election are. That's it for my slideshow. Now I'm going to get into maps and reports. And I think in order to do that, I have to stop sharing for a moment and go back to a different document. And now I will try to share again. And with any luck, this will work. Share screen. Oh, that's wrong map. That's something for later. I'm going to share my screen and go here. Okay, I'm going to go to page 1, Control L. So this is the first map we're going to look at. We're going to start with the congressional plan, and then we're going to move to the legislative plan. We're going to start statewide, and then we'll look at the metro area. This is a statewide map, and let me zoom in here down to southern Minnesota and the 1st district and explain what this map says. And there are copies of these maps and the reports in a folder that the League is going to make available to you to look at your leisure. I think I can go in maybe one more here and still keep this within my screen. Okay, can everybody see the 1st district? Okay, I hope so. So this map shows the new districts in color shading underneath. So this blue district down here is the 1st district. The district number appears here in black. The boundaries shown here by a red dashed line are the boundaries from 2020, from the past decade. So that you can see by looking at where the shading crosses over that red line, these two counties were added to the first district in order to equalize its population. Adding all of those two counties to the district was more than necessary to equalize the population. So they had to give up some, and so the panel decided to give up LeSueur County, put it into the second district to replace Goodhue and Wabasha. Then with more fine tuning, they decided they could give up some population to Cottonwood County, making it whole, and a few townships in Brown County to the 7th district, which needed to grow. And voila, they have the population equal down to 0 or 1 person. The icon here with an elephant or a donkey represents the Republican or Democratic incumbent, with the name of the incumbent, the late Representative Hagedorn, here shown near the icon showing his residence. This number here and here, the 3% positive, the 4% negative, is the partisan lean of the district, whether DFL or Republican. And in this scheme, a positive number is a DFL lean and a negative number is a Republican lean. And this, you may know, is pretty much the same as it was 2 years ago. And this is likewise pretty much the same as it was in 2020. We'll take a closer look at that in a little bit. Moving north on the map to the 8th district. Oops. How do I go back to where I was? I need to get back to where I was. There we go.
Yeah.
We told the court in an oral argument, Adam Sinkowski, my attorney, told the court that the Wattson plaintiff's #1 priority for the congressional plan was to expand the 8th district to the west in order to encompass the territory of the Red Lake and White Earth Indian reservations, so that all of the northern Minnesota reservations, including Leech Lake and Mille Lacs and Fond du Lac and so forth, would be in the same congressional district. That was our #1 priority. And we were very pleased to see that's exactly what the court did in the plan that it adopted. The 8th district had to increase its population by adding more territory. These changes permitted that to happen. But its neighbor, the 7th district, also had to increase population. So how does it get back the population it lost in the north in order to equalize things? Well, it goes down to other portions of the 8th district and takes back all of Wadena County and all of Morrison County, and around St. Cloud, it takes back the rural portions of Stearns County that were not already in the 7th district. Making those changes, along with the changes down here, brought the 7th district back up to where it needed to be to have exactly the right population. Its incumbent, Michelle Fischbach, is shown here in Paynesville. That's where she lives. Her district is a 19% Republican district, very strong Republican district. And as I mentioned, Pete Stauber's district is shown as 0% DFL. Now let's take a look at the metro area. Let's see. This 11 county metro map shows you a little bit in more detail what we did, or what the court did around St. Cloud, which was not exactly the same as our proposal, but it was similar. Enough similar that we're very happy with it. The 6th district had to lose population, and most of the loss was in this part of Stearns County. But they also lost some in Anoka. And why did that happen? The 5th, 4th, 3rd districts all had to lose population, as did the 2nd. Anderson plaintiffs proposed a third district that looked an awful lot like this. Not identical, but very similar. And when I saw it, I said, my gosh, I wish I'd thought of that, but it makes great sense. Because they took the third entirely out of Carver County, making a nice neat boundary here. And then they went up into Anoka to add back the people that they needed to after taking out all these people. They added Hopkins, all of Hopkins, because again, balancing off what they lost in Carver County, they needed a little bit more. And also because the 5th district needed to give up people. So it gave up Hopkins and a few blocks here in the city of Edina. That's why you are split once again, as you were in 2020. The 4th district had been all of Ramsey County and the southern part of Washington County. It needed to shrink. The 2nd needed to shrink. Let's take a look at the 2nd now. Because you saw that the 2nd had lost both Goodhue and Wabasha County to the 1st district. And that in order to make things come out equal for the 1st district, LeSueur County had to be added back to the 2nd. And that made things almost equal. You see this very careful line dividing once again Northfield Township as 10 years ago in that area. And a little bit more territory up here. They took in the the northern part of St. Paul Park and the city of Newport and these blocks here in Woodbury. And that completed the whole thing except for one block here of 150 people in Stillwater Township that had to remain in Ramsey County. You'll see that the Dean Phillips district is a little bit stronger, from about 6% up to 9%, and these are roughly the same as they were. Any questions about the map before I start talking more about statistics?
We
No
do have
questions?
some questions. Peter, we do have some questions waiting regarding state Senate districts. So I know that there will be some questions waiting for you when you get to that part of your presentation.
Okay, but
Nothing
I'll
on
move on
congressional
then
district.
to the statistics.
Nothing's
Okay.
nothing's in chat about congressional districts, but you do have a couple questions waiting about the state Senate districts.
Okay, I'm going to say more about the shift or non-shift in the partisan balance of these 8 districts. This is the first of 2 documents that I call a swing to lose pendulum. And the purpose of the pendulum is to show all of the districts in a plan, but ranked in the order of their partisanship, with the most partisan districts at the top and the closest, least partisan at the bottom. And show in the middle the change in voting pattern that would be necessary in order for an incumbent in a district like this to lose. Ilhan Omar's DFL plurality is something in the neighborhood of 56%. So 28% or so of her voters would have to decide to go the other way for her to lose. Not likely to happen. Betty McCollum is somewhere around 30%. So half of that is about 15. You'll see there are 2 safe seats. I say anything that's 20% or more, that is twice 10, is safe. Highly unlikely to change. Any district whose partisan lean is 8% or less, a swing of 4% or less could cause a change in the winner in the district. I call that competitive. So we've got 2 competitive DFL districts and 2 competitive Republican districts in the 2020 plan, the plan that was drawn in 2012 and used for the 2020 election. Emmer and Fishbach are strong. They're not safe, but they're strong. So how did that change then when we get to 2022? Here's the 2022 swing to lose pendulum. You'll see it looks almost the same, almost identical. Very little change. A couple of things happened. One, Dean Phillips moved from just below the line in a competitive district to just above it in one that's strong, but not really competitive. Nobody expects him to lose. And Representative Stauber moves from less than 1% Republican to less than 1% Democratic. He's still in a very close district either way. So that shows you where the competition is going to be. Is there going to be a lot of national money poured into Minnesota to win those competitive seats? You bet there is. It'll be a great next 8 or 9 months for political consultants and advertising firms to pour money into those 3 districts to try to win them. Now we're going to move to the legislative plan. The legislative plan is a lot harder to analyze because we're not talking about 8 districts, we're talking about 201. So I can't use exactly the same techniques for the legislative plan as I did for the congressional plan.
So Peter, here's where I'm going to tell you what questions are already waiting for you in chat.
Good, thank you.
Are these districts carved in stone at this point? I told you you might anticipate that question, but it came from someone outside our local league. Her city was divided in 2 different Senate districts, a tiny portion of the town north of the interstate added to a major portion of the Senate district south of the interstate, very small area where a representative lives and now paired with another rep. So just know that I think the concern is going to come from, we have people on this call, attendees from around the metro area, around Minnesota, other leagues, and know that it's a concern in districts other than SD 49 and SD 50, as we were talking about earlier. Thank you.
Could you clarify? I didn't quite hear which district you said that was, or what the location of the district was.
Well, it's New Brighton, and this is a concern we heard during a presentation by the State League last week. That's where this question is coming from, but I know that the question of how set things are is coming from some other districts that also have seen some division that wasn't expected.
First, as an overall statement, let me say that these districts are almost set in stone. Highly unlikely that they will be changed at all, either by an appeal of the court's decision, by a collateral challenge to the court's decision, or by the legislature deciding to do a remap. No, it's not going to happen. But each decade, there are small changes made to these maps, changes that can be characterized as mistakes. The first kind of mistake is where the court has messed up in putting a boundary along something that's not a recognizable, visible, physical feature. They thought it's a census block boundary, but actually it turns out it's a buried stream or something, or maybe it's a power line. Or anyway, there are changes. And 10 years ago, the court's plan suffered 28 changes at the hands of the Secretary of State in roughly the first month after the plan was adopted. The local governments came and said, this is a mistake. You should have put the boundary a few blocks over this way, or this block boundary is actually not where you say it is. And so the Secretary of State has authority to make those technical corrections. And the court in its order said, go ahead, Secretary of State. If there are problems like last decade, go ahead and fix them. The second kind of thing is where legislator, particularly an influential legislator, has been put into an awkward position with maybe being paired with another member, where that pairing could be resolved by a small move. that would be acceptable to other people. And in past decades, there have been those small moves, 1, 2, I don't know if there's ever been 3, but there have been a couple of legislators whose boundaries were shifted by just a little bit, having to do with pairings and where they live. A final kind of change is where, let's see. Or maybe I should stop there. I don't think that anything of great significance is going to happen because people, well, they just live with it. But if you have a concern with New Brighton, take a look at the map, identify what the problem is, articulate it, and take it either to your local government or take it to the affected legislators and see whether something might be done. Nothing major will happen, but minor things can be tinkered with. Any other questions on that subject or on the maps, Joni, before I get into?
No other questions. There are no other questions pending at this time.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to explain how this map works differently from the congressional map. With the congressional map, the red dashed lines were the old district boundaries. And I have a way I could show you what the old boundaries were, but it would be too confusing, too busy to put them on this map. So these red dashed lines are simply the ones that divide the Senate district into 2 House districts. The House number has an A or a B, and it's in red. The Senate number it's just a plain number, and it's in black. Again, the partisan lean of the district is in blue underneath it. The incumbent, if it's a representative, the name is in 10-point type, and if it's a senator, it's 12-point type. So it's a little bit bigger. You kind of need to know who's the senator and who's the rep in order to understand it. So what you'll see in most of greater Minnesota is districts that are not competitive, like District 1, 15%, that's not competitive. But there are some that are competitive. And the Indian community, I believe, is relatively happy with District 2, which was created in this shape at the request of the Corey BIPOC plaintiffs to put these various reservations, Red Lake, White Earth, and Leech Lake, all into the same Senate district. So, oh no, I got to get back again. How do I go back? All into the same district. And that's a competitive district. And I believe Representative Grossel has already announced that rather than running for the House seat, he's going to run for the Senate seat. No, it was Grossel or Green. One of these guys is going to run for the Senate seat. Moving over here, District 3, you'll see another competitive seat, but this is a House seat. Smaller, 3A, that's a House seat, 8%. The Senate number, black, a little bit bigger, 11%, that's not competitive. Looking for competitive districts, 11 is competitive. It's a 0% DFL district. Senator Rarick won that in 2020 with a similarly 0% DFL district. So he'll probably win it again. Over here in Moorhead, it's an urban area. Moorhead and Clay County is a greater Minnesota metropolitan area. It's very close at 1%. It looks as though Senator Eakin, who is the current representative senator for District 4, looks like he's out of it. I'm told that in the last year or so, he has actually moved much closer to Moorhead, and so he's in the district. That will be a very competitive district, highly contested. See any other 8% or less in here that I have missed? I'm going to go down here looking for competitive districts, and I find one down here on the southern border. Albert Lee and Austin, 2 meatpacking towns. They've a strong labor contingent down there. They have long been competitive, still competitive. 1% Republican. Senator Dornick, who has represented this area in the past, is outside the district and paired in this Rochester district with Senator Nelson. He has announced that he is going to be moving back into his old district, which otherwise has no incumbent. 0% down here for District 26, Jeremy Miller, who was the president of the Senate for several years and was elevated to be the majority leader on the declaration of candidacy by Majority Leader Paul Gazelka that he was running for governor. He is in this seat, but he probably is going to win that one. Very popular guy. In order to see what's going on in Rochester, we need to take a look at a later map, which is going to be, if I can get to it here. This one. And by the way, as I said, these maps are all available from the Edina League. You can get them from their website. And as you've seen me do, you can get a lot of detail just by zooming in. Zoom into 100%. Zoom in. If you zoom into 200%, you can actually read the street names. So there's a lot there if you know how to use it. This map is a little bit different in that it shows additional detail about the precincts. Precinct 2A, 4% DFL, precinct 1, 7% Republican, and so forth. So this is the district inhabited by Senator Senjum, who won in 2020 in a DFL district, and he may be able to win in 2022 in a DFL district, even though it is 9%, because he's a very distinguished legislator, a long career, well-respected, well-liked. He may be able to win that district. Senator Nelson down here is paired, as I mentioned before, with Senator Dornick, but he has announced he is moving out of the district. She had a very tough race in 2020 by Aletta Borud. And Ms. Borud has announced that she is running for the seat again. I expect that there will be lots of money and lots of effort put into winning that particular seat. The next map, let's see, is going to be St. Cloud. Oh, and by the way, that Rochester, the general shape of the Rochester district is very similar to what the Wattson plaintiffs proposed. So we're quite happy with the Rochester district. Let me zoom out a little bit on the St. Cloud district. We had asked that the court do something like this with a Senate district that included all of the city of St. Paul, even though it lies in 3 separate counties, Stearns, Sherburne, and Benton. And that's what they did. This is not exactly the district that we had. It may be even more like what the BIPOC plaintiffs proposed. But we like this district, and you can see that it is very competitive. 2% Democratic. Here's the Senate incumbent, Senator Putnam. He won in 2020 with just a few hundred votes. 1, 2, 300 votes. Representative Tice, who is the incumbent in a district that was very similar to this, roughly a 0% Republican district. She won the House district in 2020. She has announced just the other day that she is going to run against Putnam for District 14. Competitive House district over here, the neighboring Senate district, not competitive at all. Next map. I gotta move something out of the way here. Why is that?
So Peter, I think you can use the arrows in the upper right corner of that menu to scroll left and right. Keep going up to the bar and keep moving to the right now. And you see those greater than, equal than signs? Next to the question mark.
I don't see a question mark.
It's in a circle on the very
Oh, I
far.
see. Yeah, okay.
And now I think if you click those, it will show you the other tabs.
Well, I'm trying to get it to do the Control L. There we go. Thank you. And I'll do zoom in here a little bit. This is a map of the inner metro. That is, it's Minneapolis and St. Paul and their inner ring suburbs. And it shows the district boundaries, but it also shows the minority population, minority voting age population, with these little pie charts. And the slices, the size of the pie indicates the total number of people in the precinct who are minority. And the different slices of the pie are colored in this way, with the brown for Hispanics, the black for blacks, the blue for Indians, and the sort of orangish for Asians. So you see how the court put together its plan to keep minority populations together sufficient to form, in this case, District 59 in Minneapolis. 54.2% of the total voting age population is members of a racial or language minority group. So that is a majority minority district. Across the river in District 60, that is a minority opportunity district with 33% total minority population. District 62, call it 51% minority population. And you can see that they tried to keep the precincts that had the most minority population together in one district. Edina, to no great surprise, you don't see very big pies in Edina with less than 20% total minority populations. Okay. And if there are any questions anybody wants to go into more, let me know. I do want to call your attention to this area. West St. Paul has a lot of Hispanics, and as you can see, also quite a number of blacks. Traditionally, at least since the 1990s and probably before then, the panels drawing the plans have not gone outside, not crossed the boundary of Minneapolis or St. Paul more than once. And in this plan, they do it twice. District 66 up here includes St. Paul and also Falcon Heights, Lauderdale, and parts of Roseville. That's been traditional. But this decade, for the very first time, the panel also broke the St. Paul boundary by going into West St. Paul. And nobody knows exactly why the court did what it did. Their order does not explain in any kind of detail why they put the lines where they did. But looking at this map and where the pies are, I can guess that the reason why they came into West St. Paul was to pick up this population, this precinct with a high population of Hispanics and blacks in order to get District 65 above 50%. That's just a guess. And you'll see over here the strong Asian population in District 67 and the strong Black and Asian populations up here as part of District 65. whereas there's very few in District 64. Okay, moving on to the next. I can get I'm going to go back and talk about the swing to lose pendulum for the Senate and House plans. And this first one is the Senate pendulum from the 2020 election. This is what the court started with. Oh, I don't. This is what the court started with. You can see all these districts in Minneapolis and St. Paul with a very high DFL partisanship. And all these districts who are way above even the most highly partisan Republican district. Down here you have the competitive districts, and they're fairly neatly sorted in that all of the competitive Republican districts were won by Republicans in the 2020 election. That is not true of the competitive Democratic districts. And as I had pointed out earlier, this plan had 38 nominally Democratic seats, but the Democrats did not win control of the Senate in the 2020 election under this map, because these 5 senators, most of which, all of which I have mentioned already in connection with the map, they are in Democratic districts, but they won them. That's why Republicans controlled the Senate in 2021. Now, how does that change when we go to the next map, the 2022 map? I can. This thing out of the way. You'll see that the top of the pendulum, those safe districts and most of the strong districts are just the same, except that there are some pairings. We have Senator Latz paired with Senator Lopez Franson. You guys are very familiar with that. It's a highly Democratic district, and yet these two happen to be paired. Likewise, on the Republican side, there is a highly Republican district, second most Republican, with 2 who are paired. But Gazelka, as you know, is running for governor. In this pairing, Bill Ingebretson has announced that he is retiring, so that's not a real pairing. These 2 are going to have to duke it out. I think they are currently in the same district. They may move.
Peter, as long as you're at that part of your analysis, we do have another question in the chat, and that is, okay, is there an advantage? What advantage is there an advantage to anyone for the split that has occurred with with former Senate District 49, or the split in the Edina, where 7 of the Edina precincts now move to SD 46 to join Hopkins and St. Louis Park? So that's the last strands and pairings.
I have a whole new paper called Edina Musical Chairs that deals with that subject. Can I come to that a little bit later?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've got a table on that one. Is there another one?
That's the only question at this time.
Okay. Up here it shows Senator Johnson and Senator Eakin paired, but as I've mentioned, Eakin has moved, so that's not a pairing. Senator Sencham, I mentioned, has been moved above the line, so he is now in a strong DFL district, so he's going to have a hard road ahead of him. I had mentioned Senators Nelson and Dornick. That's been resolved by Dornick moving into the open seat in District 23. The pairing of Housley and Bingham has been resolved in two separate ways. First, Senator Housley moved, and she did this a year or more ago, moving from St. Mary's Point to Stillwater. So she's now actually a resident of District 33, and she will be running there. Senator Bingham, for her part, has already announced that in this very competitive district and leaning Republican, she is going to run for the Washington County Board instead of running for the Senate. And a representative in that area, Tony Jurgens, has announced that he will run then for this Republican seat in District 41. Let me come back to Osmic in a moment when I talk about musical chairs. Jerry Newton, as I think I mentioned, had announced that he was not going to be running again. And so Jim Abler, he's in a Democratic district, he will have a tough race, but he's not going against an incumbent. And Senator Newton recently announced within the last few days that he will be running for the House seat up in that area. Senator Rarick is in about the same position as he was before. The Osmek and Johnson pairing relates to the Franzen and Latz pairing. And this might be a good time for me to go to my little table on Edina musical chairs after maybe first going back to the map of the metro area, if I can find it here, and show you in a little more detail how that all, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go in an entirely different spot. I'm going to go here. Can you see this map of including Lake Minnetonka and Hopkins, St. Louis Park, and so forth?
No, it's the table that's still showing.
Okay, I got to do an escape and then go back in again. I'll stop screen share. Then I'll go back in again. Now can you see Hopkins, St. Louis Park, Edina?
Yes, the map is showing.
Okay. So here you see the pairing between Latz and Franzen. And it's a little hard to see right away until I pointed out to you that this District 42 is open. Let me talk a bit about how I decided to draw this part of the metro area and the elements of the Wattson plan that the court incorporated in its own plan. I started in the western suburbs trying to address a problem with Plymouth, which was, as Representative Cleavorn told me again and again and again, it had been divided. The green line is the 2020 Senate district lines. It had been divided into 3 different Senate districts, and she thought that that was wrong. And I thought, well, I remember she told me that, and why don't I see if I can do something about it? So what I did was, I said, I'm going to start here with Plymouth. I'll start with a Senate district that is all of Plymouth, and then see what I have to do in the rest of the area because of making that change. Well, one of the things that did was to eliminate the connection between Plymouth and Minnetonka. Senator Johnson Stewart had this District 44 that was roughly evenly divided between Plymouth and Minnetonka. I've got the statistics in that table that I'm going to show you in a minute. But if you focus this district on Plymouth, then what you get down here is sort of empty territory that can be filled in by the Minnetonka district, moving to include not just Lake Minnetonka and the cities that have shoreline on Lake Minnetonka, but also the city of Minnetonka. And that's what I did. The Wattson proposal included almost all of the city of Minnetonka in a district with the Lake Minnetonka area other than Minnetrista and St. Bonnie and Mound. And it was a 10% DFL district. The existing District 33 was a 12% Republican district. So that was a swing of 22%. And that was my #1 priority, actually, for the legislative plan, was to turn Minnetonka blue. The lake is blue. The high school's colors are blue. I thought it would be appropriate if the Senate district turned blue. So that's what I proposed. And I was pleased to see on the afternoon of February 15th that that's sort of what the court did. Not exactly the same. They did something that was probably a good thing. I had this district down here coming up into western Hennepin County to take Minnetrista and St. Bonnie. Oh, they didn't do that. They kept District 48 here in Carver County, and that moved the center of gravity of this district over to the west. It made it a little bit less Democratic, but it's still 3%. It's still a flip, a major flip. But that puts Senator Johnson Stewart into a pairing with Senator Osmek, leaving her district open. So that some of the earlier conversation on the 15th was, Senator Latz, you're paired with our friend Melissa Lopez Franzen. How about you move to that open seat in 42? And after a while, he said, I'm not going to do that. And I'll show you why he decided not to do that. Meanwhile, Senator Franzen was also looking at the district to the south, District 50, which included West Bloomington and the southern and eastern part of Edina. How did that change from 2020? Well, you can see that her district used to include all of Edina, but it also included part of Minnetonka and part of Eden Prairie, as well as West Bloomington. So she could move within the city of Edina and still be in an open seat, because Representative Senator Wickland's district is over here. Well, why might she not want to do that? Let's take a look at the school district boundaries and zoom in here a little bit and note that Senator Franzen, while she lives in Edina, is in the portion of Edina that is in the Hopkins School District. And if she were to move south in Edina far enough to get out of District 46, she would be moving into the Edina School District. Now, many people would say that's a wonderful thing to be in the Edina School District, but I don't know where her children actually go to school. But she's in the Hopkins School District, and I could see that that might be a very serious consideration, arguing against her moving down to District 50. The two House members down here, Elkins and Carlson, if I put up the House lines, they are paired in the new District 50B. So after a while, Representative Carlson said, I think rather than run against my good friend Steve Elkins in 50B, I'll run for the open Senate seat. Well, that made the options open to Senator Lopez Franzen a little smaller. Now, let me take you to that little sheet on Edina musical chairs that shows you the statistics involved in these choices that the members made. So the maps are released on February 15th. I showed you District 42, and the questioner was asking about, well, how did the territories stack up? This shows you exactly what was at play. In the new 42, 73% of it came from Senator Johnson Stewart's old District 44, and 11% came from Senator Rest's old District 45. So you would think she would want to stay or be in a district that had 73% of her former voters.
So Peter, we're still looking at the map, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I've neglected to do an escape. I have to do a stop share. And now I start share again. Now can you see the table?
Yes.
Okay, okay. I'll go back over that. When the maps were released, District 42, the Plymouth district, had no incumbent. And it was composed of 73% was District 44, that Johnson Stewart had been the incumbent, and 11% was District 45, where Ann Rest was the incumbent. The Osmek Johnson Stewart territory broke down. 61% came from Osmek's old district, 35% came from Johnson Stewart's old district. So she had a choice to make. Is she going to go move back to the district she used to represent, or is she going to stay in District 45 and run against the guy who's 2/3 of the district is his old territory? But it's gone from being a 12% easy walk for him to a 3% Democratic district that would be perhaps a hard race. In District 46, where Senators Latz and Lopez Franson were, you could sort of see this on the map, but it's actually clearer just using the numbers here. 82% of that district was Latz's old constituents, and only 18% was Lopez Franson's old constituents. Her constituents had moved down into District 50, where there was no incumbent. That is why some people were encouraging her to move down to District 50. So next day, what happens? Johnson Stewart says, I'm not running for 42, I'm running in 45. I'm going to take on David Osmek and I'm going to beat him. On the 18th, Senator Latz says, I'm not going anywhere. He probably looked at that 82% and said, why should I move? Some people said he was too old. He'd been there too long. He said, no, I got plenty of youth left. I'm going to stay here. The next day, Andrew Carlson says, I'm not going to run against my good friend, Steve Elkins. I'm going to run for that open seat in District 50. Okay, that makes things a little more difficult for Lopez Franson. 16, Kelly Morrison, the House member from Deep Haven, right in the middle of this new Democratic Senate district, says, I'm not running for the House. And why would that be? Oh, I didn't put that on this list. She was paired with Patty Acom in a district that was largely Acom's, 2/3 or more was Acom. Strong Democratic district, 15% or more, but it was mostly Acom's district. So rather than take on another incumbent in a district that one of them would win, she decided she's going to take the harder road and go for the Senate district. What's going to happen in 42? Well, I mentioned that Senator Limmer's district had been a very close race 2 years ago. Just a few hundred votes, a few thousand votes difference. Bonnie Westland was the candidate who almost knocked him off. She declared she's going to run for that open seat in 42. Well, Lopez Franson is going to move there. So she decided she's going to retire. Immediately, and I'm not sure how this was all coordinated. These times are just the times of their Twitter announcements. They might have happened in a different order in real life, but on Twitter, this is how they occurred. She retired, and then Alice Mann, who had been a member of the House in 2019 and 2020, she's I think she's a physician, maybe an emergency room physician, served one term and retired. Well, she's said she's going to run for that open seat in District 50. Minutes later, according to Twitter, Carlson said, I'm not running in 50 anymore. He said something about she was a woman, he knew her well from her service in the House, and she was a fine person, and she was a woman of color. And so he was going to run for the House. He very clearly said in his Twitter announcement, it was for the House. He did not say what House district. But looking at the map, you can make a guess as to what district he might want to run in. 51B is open. 51A is the one where Elkins resides. And 51B happened to be 67% of the voting age population from his old district. He knows those people in 51B. Why should he run against Elkins in a district that's 33% Elkins when he can run in this open seat? Howard has his own separate seat. I forget the number. And the next day, Senator Osmek says, I'm retiring. I'm out. There may be, I seldom tweet. I did a tweet on March 11th about of a year ago about the lawsuit that we had recently filed. I didn't file and make another tweet until about February 15th or 16th, trying to keep track of all this stuff. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can find the latest announcements of who is running for what and not. Anyway, any questions, more questions about what happened to Senator Lopez Franson?
So we do have a couple of items in the chat that are more announcements, Peter, rather than questions. And it's that Sharon Sund may be running in 42 against Bonnie Westland, and Nathan Coulter running in 51B. Carlson would have to move. I also just want to put this into the discussion, if I may. You sent me that link that I have put into the chat. It's at the head of the chat. It's to a legislative resource that names the retirements, gives the district, the party. It identifies how the retirement was announced. And as of this afternoon, there are 27 House members and Senate members who have announced their retirements. 10 of them are women. In the state Senate, there are 13 who have announced their retirements, 6 of them women. Do you have any thoughts on what's going on? Because I think one of the things that we've prided ourselves on is inching toward better equality in the legislature, and it seems like it's going by leaps in the wrong direction.
I think some of this is a consequence of the panel's decision not to take a look at incumbent pairings and make small adjustments where that could be done to eliminate the pairings. But I'm not sure that that's a very big part of it, because it would have taken more than just a small adjustment to eliminate the pairing between Latz and Lopez Franson. When you look at the map, you can see what a good job. Maybe I should get back to that map. You look at the map, you can see what a good job the court did in, let's see here. In keeping cities whole. They may have divided Edina, but they kept Hopkins and St. Louis Park together in a district. Neither one split at all. They united all of Eden Prairie in a district. Bloomington's divided only once, as it had to be, because it's bigger than the size of a Senate district. Look at this nice little district here. The Senate district composed of all of New Hope, Crystal, Robbinsdale, and Golden Valley, plus a little bit of Plymouth.
Peter, you
I
need
don't
to
think
share
things
it
have been
again.
that simple in this area for a long time.
So
We don't-
Peter, you need
we
to
don't-
share the map again.
Oh,
That map is not showing.
okay, I'm sorry. I got to get back to there. Thank you for telling me. Now, can you see the map?
Yes.
Okay. I was talking about what a good job the court did in making Eden Prairie whole and almost all of Plymouth whole, and keeping New Hope, Crystal, Robbinsdale, Golden Valley, all of them whole. They only had to split Plymouth in order to make that an equal population district. They eliminated this bit of Franzen's district, including parts of Eden Prairie and parts of Minnetonka. I think they did a really good job. And in this area, if you take a look at the 2020 Senate plan, District 33 had come down here into Chanhassen, into Carver County. Well, it doesn't do that anymore. So I think they did a good job overall, and it's unpleasant that so many people got paired, but that's just part of the consequence of trying to keep cities whole, and the cities that you choose to keep whole, who maybe were not before. I thought they did a marvelous job up here keeping Blaine whole, Lino Lakes whole. Didn't quite do it with Coon Rapids. We proposed, the Wattson plan has proposed, a district would have kept Coon Rapids whole. You can't keep everything whole.
So Peter, it sounds like from our previous question that New Brighton actually took a big hit in terms of numbers of lines. But you and I had a brief conversation about the number of pairings. Would you like to say something about that? Because it sounds like the Wattson plaintiffs were actually recommending far fewer pairings than have resulted.
Yes, I have a chart on that in the materials on the web, and it shows the number of pairings proposed by each of the four plaintiffs. And in the Senate plan, we were pairing only 10. I think the Corey plaintiffs may have been the highest number of pairings, and I forget what it was, but the court paired 22. But I was drawing the plan with a knowledge of where people resided, and I was trying to avoid pairings wherever I could. I did not make that a high priority, and I wasn't going to draw any districts that were distorted in order to accomplish that, but I still tried to avoid them where I could. But even though I tried so hard with the Senate plan and got only 10, which was lower than anybody else, on the House plan, I had 45, which is one more than the court came down with at 44. So
is this a record number this year? Has the number been as high as this in past redistricting cycles?
I have not looked at that. I don't know the answer to that. Anything else?
No other questions in chat, and we have just a few more minutes. Is there anything? Let's see.
Yes, I do have some additional documents I would like to share with you.
Okay, and then there's also a question regarding the district conventions for the parties
Yes.
and the primaries. So that question just came into chat.
Don't know what well, I know in my own district, District 45 in the Lake Minnetonka area, the Senate district convention is set for April 10th at Minnetonka High School.
I can speak
So
to
that's
this.
roughly the time I imagine that the others are, but I do not know.
Well, I can speak to this. I do know the answer to it. And it's that the party conventions, at least for the Democratic Party, will be held in the new districts. I believe it would be uniform across the state. The only way that the conventions would have been held in the old districts is if the maps had not been announced by March 9th. So now with the maps in hand, it will be the new Senate districts that will have their conventions, will host the conventions being planned by leadership from old and new when that exists. And then the primaries, I believe what we've been told about CD1 is that the primary election will be held on the same date as the special election, but one will be in the old congressional district and one will be in the new congressional district. to make it really interesting for election judges.
Yes, that's exactly right, Joni. Yep.
Can you see the table that says state panel seat core constituencies?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I did a similar table for the Senate. I hope I have, I'm probably going to run out of time, but I thought, I was curious as to where these districts came from. I said I thought I recognized a lot of the districts, but certainly not all. So I did a little study of where did the panel's plan come from? What were the core constituencies that they relied on? And I see that they relied a lot on our initial plan that was filed on December 7th, 92%, and you can see which districts. And they relied a lot on the Anderson plan, the Republican plan, filed on December 7th, 93%. But I don't think I mentioned that after the oral argument, I took a look at the competing plans and put together a congressional plan that I thought took the best from each of the four parties and was something that could be endorsed by both the Republican Senate and the Democratic House. Congress, what do they care about congressional districts? Couldn't they agree on that? So I put together this plan, the plan number 10, and I don't know that the court ever saw it. I didn't send it to the court. I sent it to the Senate and House redistricting committees and to my friends who are supporters of a redistricting commission and said, gentlemen, ladies, take a look at this. I think you might be able to agree on something. And boy, the court's plan was an awful lot like that plan that I presented to the legislature, and they chose not to enact. Now, I think I'm going to run out of time here, but I've done a similar thing for the legislative plan, core constituencies, L, for the metro suburbs. Now, am I correct that you cannot see this core constituencies, metro suburbs?
No, that is on the screen right now.
Oh, you do see it. So I did the same kind of thing for the legislative plan, starting with the Senate, and I didn't have time to finish it yet. So I just did the 32 districts in the metro suburbs, not Minneapolis and St. Paul, not outside the 11 county metro area. And I saw of those districts, these ones where all the change is going to happen, where the difference is going to be, where did the court go to get its districts? And I was very pleased to see that they went to the Wattson plan more than they went to Anderson or Sachs or Corey or the citizen data scientists. And I went down the list, district by district, showing what county was in, what the city was in, and which of the 4 plan or 5 plans in this case had the highest percentage of its plan incorporated into the court's plan. And I was pleased to see that although Sachs and Anderson had a lot of plans, a lot of districts that the court took a lot from mine. I'm at Minnetonka district, St. Louis Park, Woodbury. What happened to Edina? Where is Edina? Oh, Edina didn't show up because it's not the largest city. Yeah, it's either 46 or 50. Anyway, so that's a bragging point that the court, at least in the metro suburbs, took a lot of the work that the Wattson plans had done and made it the basis of their plan. But you can also see that the court was very correct when it said, we took inspiration from all of the plans presented to us. They were all useful. And you can see they took some of their districts from each of the participants, even what's the total, 3 districts that were most like the ones presented by the citizen data scientists who did not get to argue. They did not get to have a written submission on behalf of their plan. They just filed their plan with the court, and still in the Eden Prairie district, that's 96% what the citizen data scientists had recommended. And Brooklyn Park and White Bear Lake. District 36, major shift from a Republican to a Democratic district. Citizen data scientist said something like that. Anyway, I think it's 8:30 on my clock. I'd be happy to talk much longer, but any questions?
I think we just got some thank yous in the chat for the presentation, and I think what I can take away from this is if you see something, say something, whether it's Wattson or Sachs or I mean, you know, they took that into consideration, and I think that's really beneficial to know, even if it's not as maybe Edinans would like to have seen it turned out. I think it really does speak to the fact that they were listening to the different plaintiffs' positions. So thank you, Peter, very much, and for all of this very detailed information. I also wanted to say that right now we do not have the maps and so forth available on our website, but we will be working on getting that on the LWV Edina website at Peter's suggestion and approval to put all this information on there. So hopefully in the next day or so, we'll have it on there. Thank you so much. If there's other people from Red Wing and around the state that are thanking you, Peter. So we'd like to join that. And Joni, is there anything you'd like to say?
Well, just thank you, Peter, for your work, your foresight, and all the work that went into this, and for the time that you spent preparing it to explain it to us, and for your time this evening in generous time making this presentation. This is so much information, and I know I'm going to be digesting it going forward, but I really appreciate the clarity and that you brought to the discussion this evening. Thank you.
Thanks again for the opportunity to talk to you. As you know, I just love to talk about this stuff. That's why I'm a redistricting aficionado.
Right, exactly. For 6 decades, right?
For 6 decades, yes.
That's pretty amazing.
Actually, you may know the story that my involvement in redistricting goes back to when I was 13 years old, listening to my father talk around the dinner table about a suit to challenge the legislative districts in Minnesota because they were out of population balance. Suit called McGraw versus Donovan. I didn't understand what was going on at all. I knew nothing about it, but I did later learn that I had a connection to that, and I began to understand that's what he was talking about. Yeah, so it's been with me for a long time, and I just love to talk about it. So thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. Thank you. And that planted the seed. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.